Hello and welcome. We are going to discuss a little more about Charlotte Wood's The Self and Its Problems, the Blavatsky Lecture in 1919. And this is a theosophical writing, and Leadbeater tells us that theosophy teaches us that upon investigation we may discover that we do not contain a soul, but that we are a soul, and that we have several bodies that emanate from our soul, and that we are only conscious of the lowest or the visible vehicle, which means not necessarily the lowest vehicle, but the visible vehicle, which suggests that as we lighten our load, as we evolve, as the soul becomes more than what it was, we may perceive ourselves differently. So in our previous discussion, we talked about opposites. And we are going to continue that presentation. And she tells us that experience seems to be the incessant transmutation of material data into conscious states, meaning that we experience, and what we experience is interpreted through a variety of realities that range from what we call the common reality, meaning the one that you and I recognize each other in, and in the various inner realities that we might experience through meditation, through dreams, through, chemical exploration, and a variety of other paths into communing or immersing ourselves within the divine. And she also tells us that it is the great paradox of existence that reality consists in the contrary working of opposites, meaning that we talked about the sphere and the point within it, and how from the point grows two lines that extend to touch, creating a diameter, two halves or opposites. She's telling us that it is between these limitations that we divine that reality exists. And that reality includes what we call the common reality, where the two of us acknowledge each other, the inner reality, and the many states within that inner reality. These are identities. And that living as we do in a world of relativity, meaning relative to each other, the special characteristics of any two poles or opposites are necessarily related and can be altered or exchanged with an alteration of standpoint. So it's not that the great paradox of existence, it is that it is the great paradox of perception, that reality consists of existing between two poles of extremes. It is our perception. It is your understanding, your interpretation of what occurs between these two poles. And in one way, you can consider one pole as being the common reality in which you and I touch each other, and that the other pole is the inner reality, which is our ideal reality. And between these two extremes, reality exists as a whole. Because what happens on the inside, our inner reality, eventually is expressed in the common reality. And what is expressed in the common reality is taken in to the inner reality, and within the inner reality it is examined, contemplated, reviewed, manipulated, and acted upon. So reality exists between the apparent swinging between these two extremes. However, if we observe nature, reality does not move between the extremes. Reality does not shift from outside to inside and inside to outside, but it travels predictably in cycles which appear to be extremes. So the opposites that we discussed earlier are merely perceptions, and that everything occurs within those perceptions. And reality is the marking of a shift from one perception to another perception, in the same fashion that the summer solstice gives way to the fall equinox, which tells us that we are approaching the winter solstice, which tells us to prepare ourselves for renewal. And our preparation occurs from that point until the spring equinox, in which growth explodes. Predictable patterns. What we experience on the outside and what we call the common reality are each other. I experience you, you experience myself, and then predictably that is taken into ourselves, and predictably it is mulled over. What is not considered useful is pushed away, and what is considered the essence, the golden nuggets, you might say, is what we take into us, integrate within us, and then through that integration, it begins to manifest, or it becomes apparent in our behavior. Predictable steps. Measurable steps. That's what science is about. Measurable results. And this is what it is saying. Reality is marked by shifts the same fashion as the solstice and equinoxes mark the shift in seasons. And in application to current events, one could say we are traveling up the coil of evolution, and through a change in perspective, similar to what is often referred to as the Dark Ages. A change in perspective with what is happening. Some people are saying that we are moving back into the Dark Ages. We are moving back into the past. And others of us will see us as experiencing something similar to Mercury retrograde, or at the winter solstice. The sun appears to not move in the sky, not that it stays light for 3 days, but that its movement, its angle of ascent and descent appears to remain the same. Or it appears to move backwards, like Mercury retrograde, where Mercury appears to be moving backwards, when in all actuality, Mercury is not moving backwards. Mercury is moving forwards, but it's reached such a point that we see it, we perceive it differently. The same as with the winter solstice. The sun reaches a point to where it appears to travel the same path repeatedly, but it's not. It's shifting very subtly in the next direction. And so oppression is nothing new and has periodically occurred throughout humanity's history, meaning that what we are seeing playing out today on our televisions, on our cell phones, on our tablets, everything that we are watching has happened before, and as they put it in Battlestar Galactica, will happen again. Cycles. And reality manifests in two essential, inseparable modes. One being active, the other being passive. Reality reveals all as active or passive. Our portrayal in reality is active when we respond and passive when we take in or when we contemplate or consider. Those are the two realities. And this is often seen as operating opposites, when in actuality it is the process of flow. Opposites represent the process of flow from one extreme to the next. And she tells us that life is a progress from matter, the shadowy end of the world web, to spirit, its upper end. Yet, it is not strictly true, because the extremes are not really divorced. The end is always present in the beginning. The beginning is completed in the end. We cannot give priority in time to either extreme. Life does not rise from the extremes, but from the central point, which is neither matter nor spirit. Life does not arise from the extremes, but from the center. And it is the center that is the whole. What lies out here are the extremes. What is within is concentrated. Life is a concentration of energies, of perceptions, of realities. Life is a concentration of everything. As human beings, we have become obsessed with the idea of everything must have an origin and an end, beginning and completion. So much so that we have labeled them extremes. Birth, death, that's it. You move from one point to the next. That's it. With no regard to what rests in between, whereas what rests in between is life. Consider this. Somewhere it is written that God said, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. They are extremes, but they are not. They are the solution to the paradox of Alpha and Omega. Solutions to the paradox. Alpha exists within Omega, and Omega exists within Alpha. The beginning exists within the end, and the end exists within the beginning, because a beginning cannot occur until something comes to an end, and an end cannot occur until something is begun. Therefore, one might say that there is no true birth and there is no true death. There is simply the continuity of flow. So there is no true origin. There is only the condition of observable change from one form to another. Observable change. However, because all is fluid, there is no definite point of origin. You cannot point at something and say that is the beginning. You can only point at something and say, we will call that the beginning, because the end of whatever was before it gives birth to the beginning. Thus, death is a birth into something else. And birth was the death of something else. It creates a paradox, and the paradox exists when we subscribe to points of origin and points of ending. That creates a paradox. When we step back and we consider that one flows into the next, night flows into dawn, which flows into day, which flows into dusk, which flows into night. You ever notice in Genesis where each day closes with the night and then comes the morning? And with the morning, all that occurred beforehand was called good. Something to consider. So there is no true origin. There is only the conditions of observable changes from one form to another. Thus, if there is no true point of origin, there is no true point of ending. There is only the concept left to us that existence is continuous and that nature is fluid. In all references to the demonstrations utilizing the point within the circle, regardless of the explanation being applied, we must view each demonstration as the point being the individual. And the developing divisions and the sphere are all relative to the individual, meaning that you are the center of that circle, and then all that rests within that circle you have influence over. But you have no influence over what lies outside of the circle. Now, the circle does not encompass all. The circle only encompasses what is relative to the point. And as each line extends from the point, reality is created within. It is the sphere of your experience. It is the sphere of your experience. A little something for you to contemplate. And I would like to thank you for stopping by, for listening to me, adding to your well of knowledge. I want to thank you for that. And I also want to wish you a profitable and progressive day. Thank you.